Ever since there is a list for the highest grossing movies of all time, there has been a silent battle of what movie gets there. As far as every movie producer is concerned, they want to make the list. But not all movies with high expectations get on the list. There's a list of 100, but we have narrowed it down to 10. In today's video, we will talk about the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time. Make sure to stick till the end to find out the movie at our number 1 spot. Coming at number 10 is Frozen 2 with a total gross of $1.45 billion on the global box office and $477.4 million in the domestic box office. Frozen 2 is an animated musical fantasy film which was produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and was released in 2019. Frozen 2 is a sequel to Frozen, which was released in 2013, and it was released as a studio's 58th film. Written by Jennifer Lee, the film was directed by Chris Buck alongside Jennifer Lee. In January 2020, the studio reported that Frozen 2 was the highest grossing animated film of all time with its earnings. The gross profit from Frozen 2 beat the record set by its predecessor Frozen, which was $1.281 billion. It also beat Incredibles 2, which was $1.243 billion. This win made Disney Animations and Pixar the studio with all top 3 animated films ever released at the time. At number 9, we have the 7th installment in the Fast and Furious franchise, Furious 7, grossing a total of $1.516 billion on the global box office and $353 million on the domestic box office. Released in 2015, Furious 7, also known as Fast and Furious 7, is a sequel to Fast and Furious 6, which was released in 2013. It was written by Chris Morgan and directed by James Wan. As of September 2020, Fast and Furious 7 grossed a total of $353.1 million in cinemas across North America. Of all the films in the franchise, Furious 7 had the highest grossing in the opening weekend, bringing in a total box office gross of $1.518 billion worldwide. The Avengers was released by Marvel Studios in 2012 and has a total grossing of $1.518 billion in the global box office and a total of $623 million in the domestic box office. The movie set numerous box office records and it was the 3rd highest grossing film of all time at the time of its release. It was also the highest grossing film of 2012. It generated a total of $1 billion on ticket sales alone. The Avengers made the list of 100 greatest films of all time in 2017 in an Empire magazine poll. Ever since this film, the sequels to it have been released. Walt Disney's The Lion King comes in at number 7 with a total grossing of $1.66 billion in the global box office and $543.6 million in the domestic box office. The lifelike version of the animation, Lion King did steal the hearts of many. The Lion King opened to a huge success, coming as the best domestic opening with a total earning of $191.77 million for its first month. These earnings unseated the Deathly Hallows Part 2, which had held the record for 8 straight years. China was the first to open the movie before the US and the rest of the world's day and date release. As a result, they made a total of $100 million in the first week of the film's release. By the end of 10 days off release, The Lion King had amassed a total of $544 million. One thing that really helped the reach of this movie is the appearance of Beyoncé, who voiced older Nala in the film. She also had her songs Spirit and Can You Feel the Love Tonight on the soundtrack. She accounted for 22% of the movie's social media reach entirely, with her having over 206 million followers across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The 6th highest grossing movie of all time is Jurassic World, grossing a total of $1.671 billion in the global box office and $652 million in the domestic box office. After a 14-year break, Jurassic World opened its world to fans again, and the opening was as huge as one would expect. It made $208.8 million alone in its opening weekend. It also made a total earning of $316 million for its 5-day opening globally. Its total global gross of over $1.6 billion made it to the second highest grossing film and the fourth highest grossing film of all time in 2015. Released in April 2018, Avengers Infinity War accrued a grossing total of $2.48 billion in the global box office and a total of $678 million in the domestic box office. Infinity War came out with a bang and broke down a number of box office records in various markets. It set the record for the highest opening weekend earning worldwide, and it was the fastest movie to ever hit $1 billion and $1.5 billion. It also became the highest grossing film for 2018. In the domestic box office of Canada and the United States, Avengers Infinity War set records for the highest grossing movie on the weekend of its opening. It also made the fastest cumulative grosses between $150 million and $215 million. It became the highest grossing film of all time in a lot of domestic markets, including Mexico, Brazil, and the Philippines. Star Wars' first movie grew to become a phenomenon in the world of pop culture, and it was soon followed by sequels that could be considered a success. A sequel trilogy was started in 2015, with the first being Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It cost $245 million to produce this film, and the expense proved worthwhile. The film was able to generate a total gross profit of $2.68 billion in the global box office and a total of $936 million in the domestic box office. It became the most successful movie of all time in North America with over $936 million as its box office revenue. It was also the third highest grossing box office opening weekend in both America after Marvel's Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. Till date, no movie from the Star Wars box office has outperformed The Force Awakens. The only movie that comes close is The Last Jedi, and that hasn't beat its record yet. With a total grossing of $2.187 billion in the global box office and $659 million in the domestic box office, Titanic takes third place on our list of the highest grossing movies of all time. Back in 1998, it became the highest grossing movie of all time, and it held that position for 12 solid years. Unfortunately, Avatar surpassed it in 2010, and Titanic is the first movie to ever gross in billions of dollars. It became the first movie to earn over $1 billion worldwide on March 1, 1998. On the weekend of April 13 to 15, 2012, Titanic became the second film in the world to cross the $2 billion threshold at its 3D re-release. That is a milestone for a movie that has been released before. According to Box Office Mojo, Titanic is the fifth highest grossing film of all time in North America with a consideration of ticket price inflation. Titanic also sold an estimate of over 128 million tickets in its initial run in the US. Titanic was the first ever movie in a foreign language to succeed in India, seeing that India has the largest movie-going audience in the world. Marvel Studios pops up again on our list, taking second place. The movie Avengers Endgame, it grossed a total of $2.797 billion in the global box office and $858.4 million in the domestic box office. Back in April 2019, when Avengers Endgame arrived in theaters, there was no doubt that the movie would be a success. Avengers Endgame shattered all previous box office records by making a whopping sum of $1.2 billion in its first few days of arriving in theaters. Within a few months, it unseated James Cameron's Avatar, officially to become the highest grossing movie of all time. Avatar has held that position for 10 straight years. It set the record for the highest gross for opening weekend and the fastest cumulative grosses, making a total of $2.5 billion. It also became the highest grossing movie for opening weekend in more than 40 markets outside the US, including Egypt, Brazil, Australia, China, the UK, and Mexico. Avengers Endgame set a lot of IMAX records in 50 different markets amongst the 6 inhabited continents. Topping our list is James Cameron's Avatar, grossing $2.847 billion in the global box office and $760.5 million in the domestic box office. Avatar became the highest-grossing movie of all times upon its release in 2009 and maintained that position till 2019 when Avengers Endgame unseated it. But soon, Avatar reclaimed its position as the highest-grossing movie in the world. Apart from its initial earnings that made it the highest-grossing film, it made an additional $57.5 million when it was re-released in China in March 2021. There is no competition here since Disney, which owns Marvel, inherited the franchise when the Fox Film Studio was acquired back in 2019. Avatar remains the highest-grossing film in the world, and only time will tell how long it will remain in that number one spot. Which is your favorite movie of all time? Let us know in the comment below. Also, be sure to check out other videos from us that you may like. Just click on the videos you see on your screen. For more information on this video, click on the links in the description box below.